How comfortable are you with silence? I mean, our world is getting louder and louder and louder. And for years, I was really uncomfortable with silence. I always wanted to fill up the gaps. I always wanted to be that person who jumped in if there was a lull. But a few years ago, I started podcasting. And the format of my podcast is that I interview guests, world leaders and others. And we're about 5 episodes into my podcast. I'm listening back to the episode with my wife, and I asked her for feedback. I said, okay, what can I learn? And she said, you talk too much. I'm like, really? And she goes, yeah. And I really took that to heart. And since then, a few years ago, I have a goal. And the goal is when I'm interviewing a guest, I want to make sure that I don't speak more than 5 to 10% of the time. In other words, I want 90 to 95% of the interview to be the guest. And it's been amazing what happens because I'm just quiet. And all of a sudden guests start to open up. I'm not interrupting them. I'm not trying to trump them. I'm not trying to, fit in how much I know or how I had an idea that was like that. It's just, I'm just asking questions and being quiet. And it's amazing. I've had some well-known guests on, and I've had members of their team text me afterwards and say, wow, we've worked with this person for 15 years. We have never heard him talk about X or Y. And I've just found this tremendous delight in silence and in listening. And here's what I've learned about silence, that people who listen longer than most people listen hear things that most people never hear. And we live in a world where everyone wants to talk, everyone wants to get their word in edgewise, but Elijah learned this too. You expect to find God in the noise, and from 1 Kings 19, the Lord told Elijah, go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass you by. So it's like, oh great, God's going to be here, right? So where's God? It says in the next verse, there's a great and powerful wind that tore the mountains apart, shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, there was an earthquake. Like clearly God's going to be in the earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Just because God is silent doesn't mean God is absent. Just because it might seem really quiet right now, get comfortable. Because the silence you feel, the silence that you cultivate in your life might actually usher you into God's presence. When you're quiet, when you're listening, you may actually hear God in the hush of Christmas.